I'm Christina, and I'm going to talk with you today about working with summaries in MAXQDA. I've got a few slides to go through first of all. Let's think about what summaries are in the first instance. So actually, I like to think about them as one of several writing spaces in MAXQDA. Others are comments, memos, paraphrases, and you can also write in documents as well. But we're focusing at summaries in this spotlight. And what they do is they allow us to work at a more abstract level with our thinking, with our note taking. And we can also work with summaries comparatively. So we can comparatively retrieve coded segments and then generate summaries from that level. We can also think of summarizing as a data reduction process. So taking a large volume of material that we've coded and reducing that down to a more manageable synthesis, if you like. And we can also think about all kinds of different ways of viewing, displaying, and analyzing summaries. So they're part of the analytic process for many projects, although you don't have to use them, of course. They're one of several ways that you can take notes. But they can be useful for a whole range of different analytic purposes. So as we go through and think about them from a kind of technical perspective, it's also useful to think about them from a methods perspective. How might they help you with your methods? Okay, so let's have a look at the actual functions. There's basically four functions that we're going to think about today. Summary grids. This is where we actually do the summaries. This is where we generate the summaries. So a summary grid is a table, a grid of codes and documents, and that's where we generate our summaries. And we'll look at different ways of generating summaries. Then we can work also with summary tables. So having created some summaries, we can display the summaries together with variables. Variables are factual characteristics that we can assign to documents as an example. So we can group on that level. The Summary Explorer allows us to compare our summaries, okay? And that's really useful if we want to think about different kinds of groups. And then finally, we are also going to think about the overview of summaries. So this is a way of retrieving summaries from different levels within our MAXQDA project and the document system in particular. Okay, so I mentioned a moment ago that we can create summaries in a couple of different ways. So you can write them yourself, and this is a core part of the analytic process for many qualitative methods. You can do that yourself as an individual or together with colleagues. But we've also now got the ability to use AI Assist as well. So that has been integrated into the summary grid. So as well as writing summaries ourselves or together, we can also have AI Assist do it. And I'm going to show you that in the summary grids today. But it's also worth knowing that there are other ways that AI Assist can summarize as well. So you can summarize selected text or paraphrase selected text using AI Assist as well. So the AI Assist tools that we now have at our disposal are offering additional ways to think about creating summaries that might be useful in all kinds of different perspectives. Okay, so my summary of summaries is that they're really, really great. They're really well integrated and implemented in MAXQDA, and they have lots of potential for methodological and practical applications. And hopefully we'll be able to see some of that in my little demonstration now. So I've just moved over to MAXQDA, and I'm actually working with a version of the example project, the English version of the example project that comes with MAXQDA. So if you've got MAXQDA already, maybe the trial or a license copy, then later on you can have a go at doing some of these things. Most of what I'm showing you with summaries will be in your version of the example. I've added a few things actually, but not much. Okay, so in this project, we have got lots of data. At the moment, we're just going to be focusing on the interview transcripts, and there's a bunch of interview transcripts from participants who are living in Berlin, and then a few from participants who are living in Hamburg. And I'm going to be focusing today on 3 groups of codes. So coding has already happened, work situation, group of codes, wishes for the future, and work-life balance. Okay, so just to be really clear, with the summary function that I'm talking about today, coding has already happened. Okay, up in the analysis menu here, you should see those 3 core summary functions, and we're going to start off by looking at the summary grid. And what I've done is I've generated a summary grid which is showing every single code. So as well as the ones that I want to focus on, we've also got all kinds of other codes here, and we've also got every single document that is in the project. And that's lots. So this is a really big and maybe a little bit overwhelming grid here. So I'm just going to close that down and show you that through activating documents and codes that you're interested in, you can generate a summary grid, which is much more focused around the particular emphasis that you have in mind at the moment. So I'm going to activate all of the Berlin interviews. I did that by clicking on the shortcut little button there, but if you prefer, you can also do that by right-clicking and activate. So I've activated all of those documents, those interviews, and I'm going to do the same with the work situation, the wishes for the future, and the work-life balance codes. And when I do that in that shortcut way, by clicking on that little circle, which is now turned into a diamond, it will activate all of the subcodes also. Okay, so I've got lots of codes and lots of documents activated. If you want to know how many, I'm just going to stretch this. You can see here I've got 21 codes and 10 documents activated. Okay, so now when I go back up to the analysis menu, I can click on the summary grid, and I've got a much more focused table here. Okay, I'm just going to open these up so that we can see what's going on. Okay, as you can see, this grid, this table is comprised lots of cells. Some of them are empty. So here, Selim, who is one of the interview participants, doesn't have anything in this cell here, which is the salary and budgeting code. And that means that that code does not exist in that document. So this is actually a quite nice way of seeing where there's presence or absence in your coding. Where we have a blue circle here, there is coding. So if I click on this one here, we can see the coded segments. There's just one for Selim according to workplace and career. If I go to Riley, I'll see Riley's. There's more coded there. In fact, there's several coded segments there. Okay, so what we're seeing over here on the top part are all of the segments that have been coded to the code and the document that I've got selected. Okay, before we go any further, there's a few things at the top here that we can just zoom in on for a moment. We have by default got these as circles, these nodes, but we can change them and have them as squares if you prefer squares. In fact, I think square is the default actually, but you may want to have them as values. So we noticed just then, didn't we, that Riley had 4 coded segments at workplace and career, whereas Selim has only got 1. And of course, when we have that as values, we can see that more clearly. So that's quite useful. The other drop down here is just how wide your columns are. If you choose none, then you get to see an overview, but you can't see who's who so easily, or the document names. You can have the full or short will just make the columns a bit shorter. So that's just a little bit about the top here. Obviously, we are now only looking at activated documents and codes, but we can change that if we wanted to. All right, I'm just going to take it back to the circles. I quite like the circles. Anyway, some of these cells you can see have got a green background. The green background is showing us that there has been a summary written already. So when I've just flicked here, this is a very short summary because there's not much actually coded there, but you can hopefully see the difference between clicking on a cell that doesn't have a green background and clicking on one that does. Okay, so the ones with green backgrounds have already got summaries, and most of these summaries have been written by humans or groups. And I'm just scrolling along here so that we can see all of the summaries. So the idea is that you would look at the coded segments across here, and then down here, you could write, I'm just going to put write, let's see if I can spell properly. I can't. Write your summary here. Okay. And we could do that collectively as a team if we wanted to. Okay, but we're reducing down all of these coded segments from one document into that summary. And writing your summaries yourself is analytically very useful, of course, but we do now have the ability to ask AI Assist to do that for us. And I can do that by clicking on this little button. I need to be logged in, which I am already, and I need to choose what the language is of the summary that I want. I don't have to go for the same language as the coded segments are in. So I could go for German or Spanish or any of these languages. I think this list of languages will probably increase over time. I'm going to stick with English for today, but I can choose, do I want a long summary, a medium length summary, or a short summary? And I can choose to have it in the text in bullet points or not. I'm going to go for long without bullet points first, and hopefully that will happen relatively quickly, as long as not too many other people are using AI Assist at the same time. And now I've got my summary. Now, I'm not going to talk about AI Assist in detail in this spotlight. There are other spotlights where that has happened. But what's really important to notice is that because this is an AI generated summary, it's telling us that at the top, but there's nothing stopping me from putting my cursor in here and adding or editing this summary in some way. But I would suggest to you to be a little bit careful about doing that because you probably want to keep track of what was generated by AI Assist and what is your own summary information. So you might have to come up with a way of doing that, maybe using caps. So this is my summary, or somehow indicating that by making sections or something. Hopefully in the future, I'll be able to add color in here so that I can have my summary content different colored from the AI one. But anyway, hopefully I've shown you there creating summaries in those two different ways. A couple of other things going on in this summary grid, just to mention before we move on, is that if I go to, I think it's this one here, typical. So I'm looking at typical workday for Matteo now, and you can see here that coded segment has actually got a comment already applied to it. So I can choose, that's what this button is up here, I can choose to display or not those comments. So just to explain the logic of that, remember the coding has happened already, and as you're coding in MAXQDA, you may have added a comment to individual coded segments. So here, for example, I added something that struck me when I was reading this passage here and coding it. And later on, when you're abstracting up in this summary table, it may well be super useful to have that displayed to inform your summary. So that's really useful. The display memos option does something similar if you've got linked memos. Okay, so that's summary grids. Let's move on to summary tables. You can see that I've created quite a lot of summaries. I haven't done all of them yet. In a real situation, it would probably be methodologically sound if you'd finished the summary creation process before you moved on to look at the summaries themselves in tables. But for today, I'm just going to go there. And first of all, I'll show you a couple of summary tables that have already been created. So this is a summary table focused on 3 interviews. So Riley, Matteo, and Selim. And over here on the right-hand side, we've got a number of codes. Okay, but in the cells, we've got not the coded segments, but now the summaries. So a summary table is taking the summaries that you generate from the grid and showing you those summaries comparatively. And you can choose the codes and the documents that you want to focus in on. You can also, as you can see here, have variables. These age, highest level of education, number of children, civil status, etc. They are variables, and you can choose to see those in this summary table in a number of different ways, actually. So that's one. Got one other one I've already created as well, which is this one, just focused on one code this time, but across more documents. So I've only got one column for a code, but many more documents in this table. I can also transpose this if I want to, so I can swap rows and columns. Some people prefer to see it that way round. Depending on how many of each you've got, that can be useful. And there's various other things that you can do here. You can create codes. You can highlight the rows in the color of the documents. If you've applied color to documents, maybe you've made all of the interviewees who are in a partnership or married, maybe you've made their document blue, and those who are single, you've maybe made them yellow or something, and then you could have that showing here. You can see that they then change color accordingly, but you would have had to have used color in a meaningful way for that to be a helpful thing to do. Let me show you how to create one. So I'm going to go for a new summary table and start off with choosing the documents. I could go for all documents, or I could go for only activated documents. If you remember, I started off by activating the Berlin and the Hamburg documents. So I'll stick with those. And then I can choose the codes that I want. I might go for just those two for now, those two codes, but I can select as many codes as I want for my whole my whole code system. Or I could choose the activated codes if I've done that previously. If I go for variables, what I showed you previously was that each variable was in its own column. So I had one column for civil status, one for number of children, and so on. If I remove those out of here and show you what happens if you put them in the first column. So I'll take the same few here. And rather than having a separate column, separate columns are useful for sorting purposes. I'll just go for these three. And move this so I can see what's occurring. Click OK. I'll get a slightly different display. So now I've just got one column here, or indeed it would be a row if I swapped my rows from my columns with the information in. I prefer it the other way around, actually, so I'll stick with it that way. But you've got all kinds of flexibility to work with it as you want. Okay, so now I've got a slightly more focused table that's taking up less space on my view. And as all kinds of things I can do with this. Hopefully you're seeing that what we're doing is we're abstracting away from the original data through those different phases. So first of all is the coding phase, which I didn't show you, but that's the first phase. And then you review those codes by documents and you create your summaries on a document level. And then we're abstracting further away by making comparisons of our summaries themselves. What we can do here are all kinds of things. We could export this. We could export this table to Word if we wanted it to go into a report or an article. We could save it as an Excel spreadsheet. When I want to do that, then I normally will have my variables in separate rows so that in Excel I can then sort the summaries according to the different values of the particular variables I've chosen. That's much more flexible to do when you've got a separate variable for a separate row for each variable. And finally, you can do this. I quite like this when I want to, if you think about the creation of summaries as analysis, which it is, you then may want to incorporate that analysis into a later phase of your work, maybe. And if I insert this as a document in my project, when I close down my summary tables and my summary grids, which I can get to at any point, I've now got a new document here in my document system. It's called New Summary Table. I would need to change its name. But what we've now got here is this as a data file. So I could now carry on and do additional analysis, coding, and various other things if I wanted to on this as well. So that kind of takes the idea of your own interpretations in summaries, thinking of those as data as well. Of course, you don't have to do that, so you don't have to do any of these things. These are just lots and lots of options that you have at your disposal. Many of them can be super useful for different types of project. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. You're all using the Q&A space in Zoom, I hope, if you have any questions about those, and I'll come and have a look at that Q&A space later. Before I do that, a couple of other things to show you. So I'm just going to take off the activations that I had on, and I'm going to show you the Summary Explorer now. So when I click on the Summary Explorer, which again is in the analysis menu, you can see that I've already got something sitting in my columns and my codes list. I'll just clear both of those and show you how I got that in here. So we're now we're now thinking in the Summary Explorer about comparing our comparisons at different levels. So I'm going to take Berlin first, which is a document group. So that's going to bring together all of the summaries for the documents in that group, and I want to compare those with Hamburg. So that's what I had in there previously, and I'm just going to grab the typical Workday code because that's the one that's got the most summaries created so far in this project. And when I click OK, I've got in the Summary Explorer a comparison of all of the summaries I've created from the documents that belong to those two groups. So again, abstracting away from the data another level, but doing that in a comparative way based on document groups in this example. Okay, but you can see that MAXQDA very helpfully shows us here where the summaries are coming from in terms of their original documents. We, of course, can export this to Word or Excel, as we usually can with pretty much everything. You'll see once you start using MAXQDA more and more that you have these export options in most places. So it's so easy to get your material out if you need to. Okay, let me show you another one. So something else I've created. I talked a little bit about variables earlier. And I've created sets here, which are shortcut collections or groups of documents based on variables. So there's a variable which is capturing whether respondents do have children or not. And I've previously created a set for those. So in here, we've got all of the participants without children, and in the other set, all of the participants who do have children. Let me take off my activation. So now I'm going to use that as the basis of my comparison. So I'm clearing this out. So I'm not interested in Berlin and Hamburg anymore. This time I'm interested in whether they do or don't have children. I'll leave the same code. Maybe I'll bring another code in. Click OK. And now I get something similar, but based on groups according to variables. So I'm hoping that you can see that there's a huge potential and flexibility with how you work with the summaries once you've created them. All right, final sort of feature to show you is the overview of summaries, and we can access that in all kinds of different ways. Let's go in at the document level first of all. So let's go with Matteo. If I right click on Matteo, there's an overview here. There's lots of overviews that you can visualize, but we're interested in summaries. And this is now pulled out in this list view, all of the summaries that have been created for any code, any coded segments, technically, in Mateo. So that allows me just to focus in on Mateo and the summaries that have been created from Mateo. And again, I can export these if I want to. So that's one level at which I can get an overview. I can also get an overview at the document group level by right-clicking and asking for an overview of summaries. And now I'm getting not just Mateo, but any of the documents that belong to that group and all of those summaries. So that's a quick way of getting an overview on that level and any level here, but also at a code. So if I right click, I've also got the overview of summaries here at the code level as well. So this is just that typical Workday code that we were focusing in at, but I can also do it at the top level code level. And that will give me the summaries from, oh, I thought that was going to give me the summaries for any of the ones underneath, but I'm wrong. Have I made that up in my mind? What happens when I collapse? I love it when I say something and it doesn't do it. Aha. Okay, that was because I didn't have it collapsed. Okay, so when you collapse it up, then you can access them in that way. So now you can see that I haven't just got typical Workday, but any of those codes. And that highlights something that I sometimes forget, actually, which is super useful about how MAXQDA works, is that these hierarchies are functional, right? So at the moment, there's nothing in work situation. There's no actual coding at the top level. But when you collapse it down, it pulls up, aggregates up all of the coding at that level. So you do have to think about whether you've got your hierarchies collapsed or not. Because that will affect what you're retrieving out of the software. Okay, I think I have pretty much covered everything that I was going to cover, and my timing looks to be pretty good, so that's fabulous. Let me just have a look and see if there are any questions. There's a couple of questions. Can you provide some expertise on using these approaches for an in-depth literature review? Do you have some suggestions on things to avoid or innovative insights from your own experiences? Yeah, great couple of questions there. With respect to the literature review, I did a spotlight a couple of hours ago on literature reviewing, actually, and I did talk a little bit about summaries for literature reviews. I think summarizing in literature reviews is super, super useful. Because you can focus those summaries via the codes on the particular aspects of your literature review that you're really interested in. So the example I gave in that literature review spotlight earlier today was to do with the methods sections. So if I was doing a literature review on empirical studies, I'm a bit of a methodologist. I always go and read the methods sections of articles first because I want to be sure that I think that the methods are robust as a means of, being able to trust the results of the study that's being reported. So I'm often doing quite an in-depth analysis on the methods sections of literature. So if you code all of the methods sections, then you could summarize the methods sections, not just in terms of descriptively what they're saying, but you could put your interpretive analytic brain into those summaries by summarizing, whether they'd adequately described their methods or there was anything missing in how they described their methods, those sorts of things. And then when you generate your summary tables, then you've got a really nice comparison of your assessment of the quality of the methods section of each of the articles or groups of articles that you're working with. So that's one example for literature reviews, but there are all kinds of other sort of types of coding that you might do for a literature review. So I often have a code called unsubstantiated claims. So not so much to do with the methods, but if in an article the authors say something but they don't back it up with any evidence, then for me that's an unsubstantiated claim. That's something that they're claiming to be the case, but they haven't provided any evidence. And that would also be something that would that I would use to think about effect, as being an aspect of literature that, you know, meant that the quality wasn't so good of that study or something like that. But it really does depend on what type of literature review you're doing. If you're doing an in-depth literature review, then you're really interested in the substantive topics and findings, and also in how literature builds on other studies in the past. So coming up with codes which are more substantive, or based on citations or things like that, could be really useful to summarize on the basis of. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of your question, do you have suggestions on things to avoid or innovative insights from your own experiences? I think I've been sharing some of the, you know, some of the tips from my own experiences along the way in this this spotlight session. One thing I would say is that it's really important to always use these tools for a very specific and methodologically sound and analytically useful purpose. So MAXQDA is brilliant because there's so many options, there's so many things you could do, and it's very flexible in terms of how you can do those things, and when, you know, the sequence that you do them in is completely up to you. But in some senses, there's more possible in MAXQDA than you would probably use for any one project. So I would often say, you know, just because something's possible isn't a good reason to do it. The reason to do it is because that tool is helping you to enact or put into practice some aspect of your analysis that you need to be able to do in relation to your method. So always be asking yourself why you're doing this. And the answer ought to be because it's helping me understand my data from this perspective, or because it's helping me to answer this particular aspect of that research question, or something like that, rather than, you know, it's so easy to kind of do things, you know, that sometimes people do things just because they're possible rather than because they're actually helpful. So I'm always a big advocate of strategies first, methods first. Yeah. So what you plan to do, what you need to do first, and then think about how the software can help rather than the other way around. Hopefully that's given you some additional things to think about. Where do you hope the technology will go next? What improvements of how MAXQDA does summaries? So I would love to be able to have color or other font attributes in the summaries. So for example, if I was working in a team and we were generating the summaries ourselves, then I would like to be able to write my summary in a different color from how one of my co-workers might write, so that we could easily see who'd written which summary, and then we could have useful conversations about what they thought and what I thought. And I think it's also really important if you're additionally using AI assist. So I would want some way of being able to track very clearly the summaries that are generated by AI assist. I know it tells you at the top, but when I start editing them, which I probably would, then I lose track of whether it's me writing it or whether it's AI assist. So that's a kind of one aspect of it. Most of the other things I think are really nicely implemented in terms of summaries. I would like to be able to not only do summaries of codes by documents, but to also do them not only on the individual document level, but on the group level. So I'd like to have a bit more choice of what my initial grid comprises, if that makes sense. So if I just go back, leave the questions over there. So when you generate a summary grid, it's always codes by documents. And the summary tables can be grouped, as can the can they be when they're when you're using the Summary Explorer. But there have been times when I've not wanted to summarize at the document level in the first instance. Most of the time I do, but I do think there are some situations when I wouldn't want to. So that would be the only other thing I can think of on the top of my head for additional things for summaries. One thing I've just thought of, though, going back to the previous example of literature reviews, there are some particular types of method, qualitative analysis method, that really that summaries really lend themselves to very well. So template analysis, framework analysis, and certain types of thematic analysis are really well supported by the summary functions. So that's also something to think about. The next question, from what I understand, once a table is generated, there is no way to save it. Oh, they're automatically saved by virtue of their being created, the tables. So sorry, I didn't make that super clear. So let me just go back a step. So the grid is an active thing, right? So you don't save the grid because the grid is giving you the situation as it currently is in your project. So if you do more coding, next time you generate the grid, you'll see that because of the blue dots here. So the grids can't be saved, but the summary tables, they are saved by virtue of the fact that you created them. So previously, when I first showed this to you, I showed you these two, which I'd created previously, and I'd saved them and I'd given them names. And then in the session, I created this new one here, and I didn't name it. It's just called New Summary Table Number 1. There is an edit button here, so I could edit this here. I can't remember what it was I did. I think it was Berlin and Hamburg by these codes, isn't it? So that would be a useful name. So you can just rename it here, but you don't need to save it because it's just saved. Oh, I'm in caps lock. So I would say Berlin and Hamburg, typical workday, whatever I'm calling it. And then it will get saved just automatically. That means that it's the other way around. You need to know how to delete it. So if you create one and you think, oh, that's not the right orientation, or I haven't got the right things in it, then you can just delete it there. And then it says, are you sure? So you're deleting the one you've got open. I'll do that because that was the one I created today. So hopefully that answers your question. Oh, moving the tables into QTT. Yeah, that's a good idea. So QTT is great. If you don't know very much about the QTT, go to the QTT spotlight. I'm sure there is one. But the QTT is like a repository, I think about it, where you can create a whole load of what they call worksheets, which I think of as like filing cabinets or different libraries of evidence that I've generated through my MAXQDA analysis that I want to get back to and continue writing up with. So you would send it here. So you would either send it to an existing worksheet. So there are two here, or you could create a new one. I'll send it to worksheet number 1. And you get a little sound. I don't know if you heard that, but it sounds like a sort of whoosh sound as it whooshes into the QTT. So then I need to close these down and open up that worksheet, which was this one here, worksheet number 1. Okay, and that's got a whole load of other stuff in it, but there's the summary table that I've just put in there. Okay, but there's all kinds of other things. And so this then becomes a place where I can add the insights in here. Okay, so I can start to add my thoughts about the summary table above. In fact, I don't think that's the one that I created. I think that's the previous one. I think the one that I've just put in is down at the bottom. No, I'm wrong. It's at the top. It is that one. Yes, it is that one. So it puts the newest thing at the top, not at the bottom. That annoys me slightly, actually. I prefer it to be at the bottom. I'd prefer the new things to go at the bottom so that it's a more logical sequence. But hopefully that answers your question. QTT is great.